In times of change, do not be afraid. Understand it, try to understand it better than others, and try to use it to your benefit. Because there's no greater time for opportunity than times of change. And going through an industrial revolution like we're about to go through, there's incredible opportunities for folks ahead of them.
Most people think finance innovation happens on trading floors or in venture-backed startups. But some of the most interesting capital formation happening right now is in places most people never look, like equipment finance. Today, I'm talking with Eric Miller, CEO of Ansley Park Capital, who just pulled off one of the fastest inaugural ABS transactions on record. So we're going to talk about credit, careers, and why this corner of finance quietly powers the real economy. Thanks for joining me, Eric.
I appreciate you having me, Lee. Always excited to have a discussion about our industry.
Well, we're so lucky to have you here with us today, and really appreciate your time. I want to kind of go back. Before Ansley Park, what were you optimizing for in your career, and what changed?
I'm not sure I was optimizing for anything, really. I always had the goal of wanting to lead a large, highly successful platform since my days at GE Capital. What ended up happening is I spent a number of years at GE Capital, like many other people in the industry. It was a great place to grow, mature, get trained, learn the business. 2015, I had the opportunity to go to CIT, who had always been one of GE Capital's largest competitors. And the timing aligned in terms of getting really lucky. And GE Capital had announced a week before my joining CIT that they were exiting the financial services space. And that resulted in a sale to many folks, as well as Wells Fargo, at least with the business that I was a part of. And what that allowed me to do is bring on some incredible talent. So it really started there in terms of building this team and what is today Ansley Park Capital. So Ansley Park Capital is in a business that's been around just a couple of years. It's a group of people. Many of us have been together for upwards of 25 years. And probably half the team has been together since around 2015 when we were together at CIT.
Wow. I hear a lot about all the training at GE Capital from many, many people in the industry. What was so special about the training that you went through there that prepared you for an endeavor like Ansley Park?
It's funny. At the time, I know I didn't appreciate it. I'm pretty confident that my peers didn't appreciate it much. But it was rigorous, it was constant, and it was intense. Every year we would be trained on something. As a leader, you would be sent away for not hours, not days, but weeks. We had the Crotonville facility, which was an absolutely incredible facility to have. It was like a college campus, and we'd get sent away for long periods of time to obtain the necessary training that we needed to develop our careers. But it was all the time, and it was intense, and it was great training, and it was taken very seriously. At the time, difficult to go through that while you're managing your day job. But when you look back on the years that built your career and what you were able to establish in terms of base, it was an incredible opportunity. I'm incredibly thankful for the time that I was there, and I'm incredibly thankful for the connections that it's given me in this industry, because there's a bunch of us running around.
Oh, I know. I see the bonds. They've lasted decades. It's pretty impressive. So when you're at CIT, so you've moved on from GE, you're at CIT, and you're thinking about like what's next after that. Was there a moment when your ambition got a little sharper, or when you started to think of what Ansley Park Capital could be?
Yeah, that was the result of a strategic exercise that we were running at the time, and that was in creating a joint venture partnership with a non-bank platform. And I got really excited about that, and we put in a lot of work to make that happen. Ultimately, that wasn't able to occur under my time at CIT. We weren't able to close it. CIT had made the strategic decision that they wanted to maintain all of the full assets of the large ticket equipment financing organization. But it was something that I really wanted to do and something that I was very attracted to doing. And I saw the opportunity in the space, and I saw the pivot moving a little bit away from the banks, giving non-banks an opportunity to take market share.
So what did you realize you didn't want to become?
Well, I didn't want to be a Me Too lender. I don't get excited about doing the same thing as other people. I like to be creative. It's probably why I like this business. I love mathematical equations. In high school, if there was anything that I really liked, it was balancing equations in chemistry. So equipment finance is somewhat like that. In fact, going through an ABS structuring has have a lot of similar traits. But I didn't want to do what everybody else did. I wanted to do something special. I wanted to provide a special product to our customers. I didn't want to be told what that product needed to look like. And being outside of the bank model allows you that creativity to be able to provide custom tailored solutions, but truly custom tailored solutions, the solutions that your client is looking for, not the solutions that you may necessarily want to sell. And being in a non-bank space really allows you the flexibility to do that without taking on any more loss risk.
Makes sense. So let's talk about equipment finance, because a lot of people don't really understand what equipment finance is, including myself 2 short years ago, but now I'm fully versed. So if equipment finance disappeared tomorrow, what would actually break in the real economy?
So when you think about equipment finance, I don't have to tell you the size of the industry and the amount of support as an industry we provide to anybody that owns large scale equipment, either on the consumer or commercial side. But when we think about equipment finance, there's different variations to the business and to the product. As an example, you have small ticket, which is mostly driven by vendor programs, generally credit decisioned, auto credit decision through technology, a significant technology infrastructure spend and cost related to running of the business, and a large number of people to operate the business. It's almost like a manufacturing process. When you look at some of the great lenders in the small ticket space, it's who has the best technology, who's able to provide as the quickest and provide the easiest solution for the client. When you get into mid-ticket, let's say that's called $500,000, maybe $250,000 to about $2.5 million. It's really middle ticket. And middle ticket lenders, that's really the start of financial services where you're starting to review financial statements. It's a cursory underwriting. It's a few pages in terms of a write-up. What we do at Ansley Park Capital, and what I've done my entire career, is large ticket equipment finance, which are transactions generally greater than $5 million. At Ansley Park Capital, our average ticket size is about $17.5 million.
Yeah.
We'll do anything between, call it 5, and we just announced a transaction that we led for $150 million. So the size of the transaction we could accomplish through a number of means, but being in this space, it really allows us to do so. So you have small ticket, mid ticket, large ticket, you have vendor platforms, you have people that are leasing based on residual value, true operating lessors. And then you have, like us, we're doing an in-depth underwrite, a cash flow underwrite of the underlying obligor. So what you would see in cash flow lending is similar to what you would see in our business, but that's not uniform across the industry. But supporting companies, whether they're manufacturers in their production equipment or companies that transport goods across the water, tugboats and barges along the intercoastal, we're involved, at least the industry, in everything around infrastructure and the movement of goods.
And so what industries feel the pain first if you stop, providing that access to credit?
I mean, that's probably a webcast for a whole nother day spanning a number of hours. But in the K-shaped economy that we have today, there's certain industries that have been hit harder, certainly, than others. Everybody knows what's happened on the transportation side. You see a lot of opportunity on the technology side. Most industries, I would say, are remaining generally status quo, under pressure. I'm not seeing a lot of growth across most industries. All of the growth is really aligned with technology, data center, and the AI spend.
Yeah, seeing that as well. A couple more questions on this. Why do you think people underestimate this part of finance? We kind of have been below the radar, I think, as you think about financial services. And why do you think that is?
That's a great question. So if you take a look at the industrial loan market and you take a look at credit spreads for 2025, I believe single B credits were trading, call it a spread of 280. Our business averages a spread of 600 over. We have downside protection. We're fully secured in everything we do. When you're dealing in the institutional loan market, those are cash flow loans getting attractive cost of funds, allowing them to price where they are inside of where we are. So think about the value that we create for the financial markets. We're we're a great, yield opportunity and an incredibly safe asset class. People generally pay their car payment before they pay their mortgage. They've got to get to work. That was at least the saying before COVID. Now you don't necessarily need a car, but I think the concept remains the same in terms of equipment utilization. And that's why when we focus on equipment, it's not about just the value of the equipment. What's most important is the critical, essential use nature of the actual assets that our borrowers are utilizing.
So why is this line of work or this portion of finance more interesting than people think it is?
I think it's the best kept secret in commercial or corporate finance. I just learned recently, I don't know if it was Kirk Phillips that had something to do with this at Wintrust, but I believe one of the schools in Texas now has an equipment finance major.
Yeah, University of North Texas. Yeah, we have a program there, which is super exciting. We've partnered with the CLFP and with Wintrust and some industry vets to bring that out, which is super exciting.
That's awesome, and that's great for the industry, and hopefully that's a start. We have every 2 weeks we have a walk in the park with me as the host. It's almost Jerry Springer like. But I interview one of the members of our team every 2 weeks in front of the group. And one of the questions I always ask everybody that I get the consistent answer with is, how did you end up in equipment finance? And there is not one person that I've met that has gone to school to go into the industry of equipment finance. We have all just fallen into it. Coincidentally, I just landed a job with Chrysler Financial early in my career, doing automobile collections. And then all of a sudden I'm doing credit analysis on retail customers, car dealerships, and then all of a sudden I'm moving on to a bank. So nobody really knows about the industry coming out of school. You fall into it. And it's one of the coolest industries around. Like when I think about our industry and I think about the launch of Ansley Park Capital, I've got competitors in the space. But these are also friends. These are the people who are actually saying, hey, Eric, you may want to think about this. You may want to think about that. These are old colleagues and friends, and it's awesome to have that kind of support, even from your competitors. And there's plenty of space for all of us to succeed. And it's unlike any other industry that I've heard of in terms of that collaboration. And you see it at the ELFA conferences that we all attend every year.
Yeah, it's super special and different for financial services, at least from, my experience in different segments. And I think it is part of what makes it so attractive. You talked when we were talking a little bit about the industry at large, about small ticket, mid ticket, large ticket. And if you're thinking about building a career in this space, should you optimize for one over the other? Do people move, through kind of the life cycle or switch, or do you become a specialist in one area?
What I've observed is most people stay within one function the majority of their career. However, that's not what necessarily has to happen. You need to really set out and determine what your longer term goals are and what it is that you want to do. And there are natural paths to take. And when there was a GE Capital, that was a platform that did have significant, potential for upward mobility. So generally you start off, it could be as an inside sales person supporting the originations team. Or you could start in contracts administration, working on transaction documents to close deals. Ultimately, the real strength and core of what we do is credit. And so you need to get that underlying credit training and acumen somehow throughout the process. So whether it's you starting in a junior analyst role or a junior originations role or on the contract side, ultimately you want to find yourself into credit. And I think the easiest way to get into credit is into portfolio management. Those are the positions that are probably most available and ones where you could really learn the key attributes into making good risk-based decisions. And then from there, you could go into credit, new transaction underwriting. And then that's a perfect time to step out into originations if that's really what you want to do. Or if you want to take a leadership track with that domain expertise, you now have the ability to do that. So for me, I came through credit. I think of myself as a credit person. I went into originations. My first stint was as kind of an inside sales support person at Wells Fargo. And then Rob Seltzer, who still works with me today, hired me into GE Capital back in early 2003. But my background was all credit until I took that first step into sales in 2000. I was an originator from 2003 to 2005, and that's when I started my leadership track. So I've been on the leadership track now for the last 20 years, but I did that progression between collections, credit, and then into originations. That's how I did it.
I'd love to hear about sort of the thought process of starting up Ansley Park.
We're incredibly fortunate. We've got the best capital partner anybody could ask for in terms of we're owned by funds managed by Ares Alternative Credit Strategy. Ares Management's one of the largest and most respected asset managers out there. One of the things that I like most is our culture is very much aligned. And you've heard me talk about culture, and I know lots of companies talk about culture, but it is a differentiator for us. And it's extremely important for all the employees. We created this culture, and we did so back in 2015 when we were at CIT together. And then when we went to the bank together was another pivot. And today, it's the same important traits that drive every one of us. So having Ares as a partner certainly makes it what made the process much easier. Now, it was like starting a new business. There were a lot of things that we didn't know how to do. We needed to set up employee benefits. We needed to set up payroll. We needed to get general insurance policies that most of the listeners here have never even heard of. We needed to get set up. We needed a website. We needed to get a warehouse agreement so we could start lending. It was an incredible amount of work for me and a few of my colleagues that really shepherded us through the process. And when we came out the other side as Ansley Park Capital, it was just an amazing accomplishment, certainly my proudest moment. And, looking back after 2 years of great success, it's certainly rewarding. Now, would I do it all over again? I'm not sure. It was incredibly difficult. However, for those that do have the drive, the determination, and passion to set something like this up and move forward, it's definitely worthwhile, but it's not easy. It's a lot of hard work, and make sure you have great people around you. And that's another reason. That's the most important reason I was so fortunate. I work with a gentleman by the name of Mark Trollinger, who's my mentor. He's been in this industry forever. He used to run Wachovia Equipment Finance. And having him by my side, as well as Stephanie Shockey, my general counsel, it was really the three of us lugging through that process. And we get to have some fun with the platform.
That's awesome. So what's the hill Ansley Park is willing to die on that nobody else is?
I mean, there's as long as there is a level of integrity involved and we're not sacrificing anything from an integrity standpoint, there's nothing that we're not willing to do. We're willing to put in whatever efforts are required. We've got the support of a great parent company for whatever we may need financially. I would put my head through a wall for a customer to put a smile on their face, and I think the rest of my team would do the same thing.
That's great. Where do you say no when others say yes?
We make good, prudent risk decisions. It doesn't matter to me what assets others want to put on their balance sheet. Our goal is to lose $0 over a long period of time. And so we try to be perfect with the decisions that we make on individual obligor names. And so we're very intent in how we underwrite transactions. And we've got an amazing underwriting team that's been together for a long period of time.
And just one more on this. What's a deal that looks good on paper but makes you uncomfortable?
That's a timely question. So think about what's popular today. And I'm not saying these are bad assets, but to me in this environment, they are a little bit scary. So there's always some level of technological obsolescence in the assets that we finance. Today, data centers are probably the biggest market opportunity. And a lot of people are lending against the chips that these data centers are acquiring. That's high-level technology. We're just learning about that. Lots of our peers have gone out and done financings for those assets. we're just trying to take our time today to really understand the scope of those assets, what a potential aftermarket might look like, and what are the right attributes that we need to look for in the obligors that we're looking to underwrite. But I think that's a real live opportunity today. I would also say I've always was concerned around owner-operator transportation. And I think that's certainly a market. Not only did that get a lot of attention over the last couple of years because it's been challenged, but if you talk to anybody that's been in the space for as long as I have, over the last 3 decades, this isn't the first market cycle that we've seen in that specific spot. It's probably the third or the fourth, and it will happen again. And it's really hard to figure out what the yield needs to be to protect yourself through a cycle to successfully operate a platform in that space. Kudos to those that are successful in that space.
So I'm going to dig in on that a little bit because it's been of great value to me that so many people do stay so long in this space, right? Have the time and the experience of seeing multiple cycles. What are some other trends that you've seen repeat over the course of your career or that you're anticipating to come back around?
The largest macro trend that I've seen is the one that we're trying to position ourselves for today. So when you go back to the late 90s, the early 2000s, and you think about equipment finance, it was CIT, it was GE Capital, it was Heller Financial, it was Transamerica. They were all non-bank names. When I started with GE Capital in 2003, they were still all non-bank names. Sometimes we would compete against banks, but they were banks. We were competing against the banks that were providing banking services for the obligor. Fast forward to the financial crisis and quantitative easing, and the Fed distributing a significant number of US dollars, the banks being the recipient of those dollars. So what they needed to do is deploy them and lend, and they did. They took what used to be products for them and they turned them into businesses. Now fast forward to COVID and the spike in interest rates, and what I think a lot of banks are starting to learn, and I think a lot of strategists are talking about. Banks borrow on a short-term basis. They like to lend on a floating rate basis. The best way for banks to lend into the equipment finance space, honestly, is really to lend to platforms like Ansley Park Capital or our peers. You could get your equipment exposure, you could get your floating rate, and you could get your short duration. On the flip side, we borrow long. We borrow through the public markets, through the ABS markets, and we're match funding our debt with our assets. So we're far better suited to finance longer duration assets. And so I've seen this pivot go from the non-banks to mainly the banks, and now we're seeing a pivot back to the non-banks. Now, how extreme is that pivot going to be? I don't know the answer to that. Do I think it's going to continue? I do. I don't think it's going to be an incredible shift where everybody overnight is saying to themselves what happened. It's going to be gradual, just like it's been over the last 30 years. And that's kind of an economic, a macroeconomic cycle that I've seen over the course of my career. I could speak to credit cycles. We've seen, some of those over the course of my career. But that to me is probably the most interesting because it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry that's making such an enormous pivot. Maybe it doesn't feel like a pivot, but when you're changing the percentage of dollars that are being financed by banks versus non-banks, that is significant when you really think about it in terms of dollars and scale.
I'm assuming from your seat, then you see this as a great opportunity. You spoke previously about being able to be a bit more flexible, with your borrowers or with your partners. And you've also worked at a bank. What's the nicest part about working for a non-bank at this time when more capital is flowing in that direction?
I think it's the amount of flexibility and creativity you're able to use in structuring. So clients want somebody who's going to be able to provide them the solution that they need. And they want that to be done timely, and they don't want to have limitations. So with the banks, you have significant federal regulation. whether it's with the OCC or the FDIC, there's a lot of things that the banks need to pay attention to on an obligor level. There are items that we aren't in need of paying attention to that really don't change the risk profile. Or if they do, we're able to structure around that. We could do that through tenor. We could do that through collateral coverage, through downside protection, through guarantees. But we don't necessarily have to conform to be within a box. And what the investors in the space really like about it is we provide great downside protection and significant diversification. So when you look at the pools of assets that we're entering into these asset-backed securitizations, there's great diversity for the investors, and they get a great risk-adjusted return in investing in that asset class. And I think over time, what we're going to find is there's only benefit to the non-banks. So when we talked a little bit earlier about the spreads in the institutional market, if you spoke to some of the bankers that provide us with warehouse facilities, and they work with us to do the issuances on the ABSs, what they'll tell you is the investors still view large ticket equipment finance in particular as a somewhat new asset class. And what you're seeing from some is significant tightening. And it really allowed us to have great performance in our inaugural issuance. And over time, that tightening will continue. So where non-bank lenders are borrowing, at X over treasuries, I think that spread is going to come down significantly over time, and the cost differential between the banks and the non-banks will also dissipate. There'll probably always be some spread differential, but it won't be as significant.
All right, let's talk about that issuance. So take us back to the moment you decided that we're doing an ABS, and what pushed you there?
Well, I wasn't great in terms of the crystal ball on timing. We thought it was going to actually happen a little bit sooner, but we knew we wanted to be patient. And we knew that we wanted a major rating agency on it because that would separate us from the pack in terms of inaugural issuances. And so we got that, and that was terrific. And building a pool of assets with the level of diversification necessary to get the AAA is really critical. And so it was more around building an asset pool that we felt we would get the ratings treatment that we were looking for. And so that's what really impacted the timing of our transaction. I would also say, I think most would agree, 2025 might have been an awkward year given an administrative change and, something about tariffs and some great tax bill. So that created just a little bit of a deviation in normal origination patterns. Everything worked out really well. We were able to build a great pool and execute on a $400 million offering. So we're really excited and proud of what we've accomplished in doing that.
Absolutely, you should be. I have a few questions about it because it was really unique. What did you have to prove before anyone believed the story? This is your inaugural issuance, and you got the entire capital stack rated on first issuance, which pretty much almost never happens. So why did they trust you? How did you prove yourself out?
I'm not going to say it was easy. There were probably 200, 300 meetings that occurred between investors, credit rating agencies, different investment banks. The fact that this team has been together for so long, remember, Ansley Park Capital, we're celebrating our 2-year anniversary in 10 days from now. But that's Ansley Park Capital. Prior to Ansley Park Capital, this exact team of 30 people was together at BCI Capital. BCI Capital started in 2015. My team merged with their team from CIT in 2021. So the totality of the team has been together since 2021. So that's 5 years. Now, if you go back and you look at the core of the business, and in fact, so many of us have been working together for upwards of 25 years, I think that is a differentiating factor for the market, for the rating agencies. We've done this before. We had legacy portfolio performance that we were able to demonstrate. And we also had Ares as a partner. And I think Ares is really well known for being very patient capital and taking good risk for their investors. They're not looking to rush anything for a quick buck. So in the market, they're very well respected as a great equity owner. And I think just the fact that the team with the experience that we have allowed us to do that. Now, you could look across the entire Ansley Park Capital business, and in our presentation deck, it'll say the leadership team has, I don't know, 27, 28 years of average experience. We say that because that's the industry norm to phrase it that way. If I were to go back and I were to take all 30 employees across Ansley Park Capital, I don't think the number of average years of experience would deviate that much. Maybe it's 25 years. But every employee at Ansley Park Capital has not only been in this business for a very long time, but has been a part of this team for a very long time. So I think that gave the comfort, the combination of this team, as well as the parent company of Aries. I think that allowed people to get comfortable with the transaction, allowed Moody's to rate us, it allowed us to get the AAA and do what we were able to do.
You talked a lot about culture, right? And how important culture is to you. What had to be true of the team that you had intact? Like what were the shared values or core, core to the brand before you were comfortable going out to the public markets? And, that's taking a risk, right? That had to feel a little bit personal on some level, the risk that you were taking by doing that. So how did you make sure the team was ready to tackle that risk and ready to present externally?
I mean, this team's always ready. When it comes to performance, this team is ready. We're ready today. We were ready yesterday. We'll be ready tomorrow. But culture is a whole nother dynamic. And when I talk about culture, it's a matter of being successful every day, but it's not about just performance. And I think that's where people lose sight of what culture is really supposed to mean. And where this culture really came from is GE Capital is an amazing institution. I'm incredibly thankful for the time that I had there. However, it was also an environment where certain personalities thrived. It was cutthroat. It was competitive. And there weren't enough pleases and thank yous. And that may sound silly, but when you're putting in 12, 14 hours a day of work, you want to do that with a group of people that is respecting and appreciating the efforts that you're individually putting in. So when we went to CIT together as a group, we were thoughtful about that and intentional about that and what we all wanted to do. And this isn't just, certain members of the team. This is me and every member of the team. We want to work hard. We want to win. We want to be the best. We want to be appreciated. We want to be respected. And we want to be collaborative. And so those traits allow us to do things because we live this. We don't just talk about this. We live this. And if you talk to any Ansley Park Capital employee, they will tell you, well, I hope they tell you their favorite part about being here is really the culture. But they will tell you what I'm telling you is true, that we all believe in this and we all foster that culture. There's lots of risk in that. When you have a great culture like that, it only takes one person to ruin it. It takes one person to mistreat somebody, to make somebody feel underappreciated and not recognize the value of this great organization. And so when we hire individuals, we're very intentional about the fit and the culture. And if an individual comes on board and doesn't fit that culture, they probably won't last very long.
That's great and really helpful. I like how you talked about like the values of the employees. Let's talk about, for younger talent coming into the space, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but if someone in their 20s wants a career in credit today, like what skills actually compound?
Analytical skills, financial analytical skills, understanding the basics on an accounting level to understand what it is that you're actually trying to analyze. So we're actually in the market now. We're looking for a few junior folks to help support the team. And this is the first time as a business that we're doing this. So I'm really excited about bringing in some new energy and teaching people the business. And so when you think about, well, what types of people are you interviewing? Might be somebody with 2 or 3 years actual experience working for a competitor, working for a bank. Maybe it's somebody right out of school. But that person shows the determination to drive. They're a good human being. They think about things the right way. They think about the world the same way in terms of, making sure that you're doing the right thing and you're willing to learn and you're malleable. We could teach the basics as long as you have the foundation. And that foundation is really elementary accounting, understanding a balance sheet, understanding an income statement. And then over years, you don't learn credit, in a day, week, or months. You learn over years. And if you stick with it, you do become an expert after a period of time. Now, there's things that I learn every day, and I've been at this, I think, 28 years now. And so I'll see a transaction, and I'll be, kicking it around with Mark Trollinger, and Mark will say, "Hey, Eric, you think about this?" I'll be like, "Hey, that's a great idea." So there's always ways. It reminds me of, I'm a huge fan and participant of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's one of those things. It's not about winning or losing. It's about learning. So even when you lose, you're learning. And in this space, the learning never stops. There's always something new. And it's one of the things that keeps me excited about coming to work every day.
One question I have that I've been thinking about over the past couple of years as I've been understanding the industry more and more is like trying to determine who thrives in equipment finance, who would hate other aspects of finance, say like investment banking or something like that. So what are the traits? It sounds like creativity, adaptability, and of course like some core education. But what are the traits that you've seen over your 3 decades of a career in this space, whether it's with your own colleagues or even your competitors, that have allowed people to really shine and really be successful?
There's 3 things that make somebody successful. One of those is drive and determination. You could push somebody, but inherently, somebody's success and drive is going to be presented and determined by themselves and how much they want something. You could try to teach it, but it's not everybody could appreciate it from that perspective. Acumen, aptitude, just general intelligence. This isn't an easy business. There is sophistication to it. You have to be good with numbers. Mathematical skills are important. The third trait is experience and expertise. Now, if you've got the first 2, you're hardworking, you're determined, you want to succeed, and you happen to be pretty sharp, high IQ, we could help you with the third piece. And that's really learning the foundations of the business, learning all the aspects of each functional area of what a platform like Ansley Park Capital looks like, and really understanding the mechanics behind the decisions you make in terms of why lend to this specific company, why those assets, why that term, why FMV versus loan. There's just different variations to what we offer, and over time, with expertise, it allows you to be able to do this with a very small team. Now, we've got a lot of assets on the books, but we're only 30 people. You don't find most businesses as large in terms of asset scale and as small in terms of employee population. I think it's pretty cool that such a small number of people can make such a large impact. And so that's what I personally love about our business. This isn't a business based on technology. This is a business based on expertise and execution. And if you're driven and determined and you pick up those other pieces, you're going to succeed. And every leader that I've seen that has succeeded in this space has succeeded in all 3 of those areas. And they've been around a long time. Most people, you don't generally find superstars in our space that have been doing this for 5 to 10 years.
When your deal was oversubscribed, what were investors really underwriting? Were they the assets, the platform, or you? And I ask this question because we've seen as more equipment finance companies have started to move into the ABS markets that there's still a misunderstanding of exactly what equipment finance is from other segments of financial services. And so I'm curious what signaled sophistication among the investor class when you were engaging with them, but also what you thought really got this across the line.
Well, it certainly isn't because of me alone. I'm part of a great team, and it's quite possible that that great team was a big part of that. The experience of that team. Ares as our investor was a big part of that. And ultimately, the pool of assets that we were able to originate and present to the investment community and get rated by a major, I think that's just the recipe for success. I think you have to come at it all three ways. I think starting up with not a lot of experience, you're going to have a really hard time. If you don't have a really good capital provider, I think it's going to make people nervous, and it's going to take you a number of years. And I think that's why it took most in our space a number of years really to get to that inaugural issuance. For us, this is our inaugural issuance, and we're going to be a repeat issuer in the market on a going forward basis.
Great. So a couple of just closing questions for you, Eric. Put you on the spot. Some more. So what's a belief that you hold about credit or capital markets that most people disagree with?
It's not that most people disagree with it. Most people forget. And the most important thing is character. Period. End of story. I don't care what financial statements look like. When you have a person behind the scenes doing dishonest things, certain things could appear much better than they are. And I could say the opposite is true. You could have a set of financial statements of an underperforming company, but you could have somebody exceptionally talented, driven, that does the right thing all the time, that you could see as being successful in the future. But I really think it's that C in character that most people overlook and don't think about. I think about it in every transaction that we do. Whoever is running the company that we're lending to, it's critically important that they're a good person and they're operating with great integrity. That's the easiest question you've asked me, and I hope everybody would answer it the same way.
Okay, one more then, a little harder. Where should people pay attention over the next few years?
That's a great question that I don't know if I have a great answer for. I think right now, a lot of people's crystal balls are still quite cloudy. There's still a lot of change developing. I think AI and the spend behind AI is going to continue, grow, and make a huge impact on efficiencies across numerous industries. The one thing I get concerned about is the one thing that I hear everybody else talk about, and those are roles for the youth of our country. Learning AI and using it as a tool myself, I understand why there's great risks to junior level positions. That's probably my biggest concern. However, I'm extremely optimistic about what our country is going to see over the next few years. I think we're going to see great growth as a result of AI. I think we're going to see great profitability and efficiency driven by AI. And you're going to have winners and losers like you always do. And what's probably most exciting is this will be the single largest industrial revolution of any of our careers. Now, I've been doing this for 28 years. I've seen lots of changes. I used to use an adding machine. I used to have a Rolodex. I used to have to push buttons on a device on my desk to actually call people. There was no email. It was interoffice mail. I used to deal with all those things. And here we are today, and I'm saying, I think we're about to head into the largest industrial revolution that this country has ever seen. And I'm excited about what that opportunity brings. Now, what I will tell people is, and this was a great learning exercise at GE, and a trait that you needed to have to be successful. In times of change, do not be afraid. Understand it. Try to understand it better than others, and try to use it to your benefit. Because there's no greater time for opportunity than times of change. And going through an industrial revolution like we're about to go through, there's incredible opportunities for folks ahead of them. Don't be in the background worrying about it, because if you are one of those people, the fear that I'm concerned about with roles evaporating, you could end up one of those people. Be at the forefront, be a leader, have great ideas, be adaptable. And I think things are going to work out really well. But I think more broadly, from a macro perspective, I think it's going to be a great time for this country and the people of this country. And hopefully, maybe some of this divisiveness that we're seeing could go away.
So thank you so much, Eric. What I love about this conversation is that it shows how much impact happens outside the spotlight. So equipment finance may not be the flashiest, but certainly foundational. And the people who do it well end up shaping real outcomes in the economy. So if you're early in your career and curious about credit, this is an industry worth paying attention to. Eric, thanks for making it real and for walking us through how this actually works.
Lee, thank you for the opportunity to speak about the business. And for those folks that want to learn more, I'm happy to take phone calls and talk to people and help guide to the best of my abilities. And for anybody that wants to learn more about what we're doing at Ansley Park Capital, it's ansleyparkcapital.com or ansleypark.capital. Appreciate everything that the ELFA does for this industry and for Alexa in putting this together. That's greatly appreciated and inviting me to speak with you today, Lee. Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time, Eric.